Hi, I'm Rita. Welcome back to my booktube channel, Life Worth Reading. Today I'm filming a wrap-up and I am telling you all about my recent reads from January and February because I haven't done a wrap-up this year. So I'm going to tell you about all the books that I've read since the beginning of the year. In terms of the number of books that I have read, I have attempted to read 12 books, but I've actually only finished 9 of them, which means that I have 3 DNFs since the beginning of the year. I am definitely counting all of them because I read very far into these books before I DNF'd them. So it wasn't like I just read like 10 or 20 pages and then I was done with it. I actually read quite a little bit into these books. That's why I'm counting it. And if you don't count your DNFs, that's totally fine, but I'm going to count it and I'm going to tell you all about them. In terms of ratings, like I mentioned, I have 3 DNFs. I have no 2-star books. I have 3 3-star books, 2 3.5 books, 3 4-star books, and 1 4.5 book. So as you can see, so far my reading hasn't been that great, quite honestly, but we're getting there. I've already found a new favorite series. We're getting in the groove of things. I'm going to try and pick up more things that I know that I'm going to enjoy soon. But yeah, no like rave review 5-star books everywhere, not quite. Oh my god, I just moved my camera so bad. Am I still here? I'm so sorry. Like I moved my camera so hard. Oh my god. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it because I wasn't looking. I don't know what happened. Okay, we're just going to roll with it. Anyway, I'm going to start with my DNFs first because I don't have a lot to say about them. The first book that I tried to read this year and I sadly DNF'd was The Echo Chamber by John Boyne. This I DNF'd because it was wildly transphobic. This book is about a rich upper class family in the UK the father is like this famous show host and the wife is a famous author, but she actually hires a ghostwriter to write all of her books. And then the kids are just despicable, messed up people, I guess. I picked this book up from my library thinking that it was going to be like a really self-aware portrait of upper middle class people, their relationship with social media, the cancel culture that we have. But unfortunately, though it started like in a fun way, it quickly went downhill quite fast for me because towards the halfway point, even less than that, the dad tweets something that is wildly transphobic, and that's the whole setup for the rest of the book, is that this famous person tweets something that is controversial and they have to deal with the consequences of it. And I thought it would be anything but this, let me tell you. It was just a really transphobic way of looking at people. They were making fun of transgender people, of non-binary people. And then not only was the content transphobic, right, but you could think, okay, maybe the author is trying to showcase how ridiculous transphobic people are. But no, because John Boyne himself, he has quite a transphobic book as well, a fiction book, and even the title is very transphobic. And so I quickly realized that this is just the author himself trying to write a humorous book about how cancel culture has gotten so wild recently because he's trying to excuse himself from the offensive things that he says and thinks. This was a no for me, obviously, so I DNF'd it. I don't recommend it, and I moved on to other things. Then the other book that I DNF'd was actually an audiobook, and it's called Schmutz by Felicia Berliner, and this is about our main character Rizzle, who is an 18-year-old Hasidic woman who has grown up in a Hasidic household, and she is very protected her whole life. She's very innocent in terms of relationships and sex, and her parents are trying to find her a husband so she can marry off. And her secret is that she's addicted to porn. And I thought that the setup was interesting. I started listening to the audiobook. I was having a good time, but I didn't really feel like picking it up. The narrative style wasn't my favorite. The characters felt really flat for me. Like, I really liked our main character and I cared about her, but like people around her, they just all fell really flat for me. And the narrative style itself, like, I can't really explain what it is, but I feel like the writing itself just didn't execute this concept well enough for me to continue on. And I just got to a certain point where I thought to myself, I just don't feel like listening to this audiobook anymore. And so I DNF'd it at 60%, which is actually what happened with The Echo Chamber. I also DNF'd that at 60%. That's why I'm counting them, because I read past the halfway point and I just really didn't feel like it. There's nothing especially wrong with this book or with this concept. It just, the narrative style wasn't working for me and I just didn't feel like reading it anymore. God, my hair is really annoying me today. I'm sorry. I know that I keep touching it, but it's just really annoying me today. And finally, this is the one that's the most recent. Like, this one hurts the most, and that is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogers. And I just made the decision today to DNF this book. I was reading it for a vlog that I think might already be up. It's probably going to be up by the time that you're watching this wrap up. And this is about our main character, Elizabeth. She works at this library. She's an orphan and she wants to grow up to be a warden, and she lives in a world where all sorcerers and magic are inherently evil, at least you believe so, and books are actually living things. There's these types of books called grimoires, and they are alive, and they have, if they're dangerous to society, they have to be locked up and maintained and trapped in these libraries. And at the start of the book, one of these grimoires is set free, and Elizabeth has to kill it and destroy it, and she is accused of treason, because for these books to come to life there has to be sorcery involved. So somebody sabotaged the book so it would come alive, and she's accused of treason. She's taken to the magistrate. It's a whole thing. I DNF'd this book at 340 pages because I could not read this anymore. This was so boring. I honestly cannot really believe it. At the start of the book, I was quite interested. I love library settings, and though the characters weren't the most fleshed out, or the writing wasn't the most interesting, I still really appreciate library tales and all of that, but this was just so painfully boring. There's a really forced self-described enemies to lovers when they're really not, and I just didn't care about any of it. And the part that I got to, I still have 100 pages to go. The conflict is resolved, vengeance has been applied, fights have been had, and I still have somehow 100 more pages to read. And I can't do that. I really thought that this book was over, and then I just looked and I still have 100 pages to read. And I can't do it anymore. I don't care about these characters. I don't care about this relationship. The plot has that whole synopsis that's in the back that happened in the first 50 pages of the book, and then it just turned into something completely different that I'm not interested in. So I'm DNFing this one. I own it physically for my physical TBR, and I am unhauling it because this book was just not for me. And I'm glad that I read it, right? I bought it, so I'm glad that I read it, but really not for me, and I couldn't push myself to read this book. Now let's talk about all my other mildly disappointing 3-star reads. The way that the last 3 books that I read were all 3-star, I can't do this. The first one that I'm going to talk about is actually, and sadly, Life Ceremony by Saka Murata. This is a book that was on my February TBR. It's a collection of short stories by the author of Convenience Store Woman and Earthlings. And my history with Saka Murata is this. I enjoyed Convenience Store Woman. I gave it 4 stars. And then I had to DNF Earthlings because the subject matters at which she talks about are so disturbing to me. And she talks about them with such a graphic detail that I had to DNF it. I couldn't stand it. And so I was very uncertain going into this book because I was like, at what side is Life Ceremony going to fall? And unfortunately, it was right there in the middle. I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it. It was just okay. Most of the stories were about life, death, cannibalism. Also, I liked a few of the stories, but most of them were just fine. I guess that some of them were more on the side of Earthlings, which I didn't really appreciate. And I just don't think that this author is for me. I'm not definitively writing her off as an author to read. Like, if she comes out with a new book, I'll probably pick it up. but this just solidified that she's not really my type of author, and the type of subject matters that she chooses to write about are not my favorites, and that's perfectly fine. I still love a good short story collection. I love a bizarre short story collection. I'm going to talk about one that I really enjoyed, but this type of stories are not for me, and I think that that's perfectly okay. I didn't listen to the audiobook. I read the ebook on SCRIBD, and it was just fine. It was just fine. I was glad that I knocked it off my TBR, but it was just okay. Then I also read my first graphic novel of the year, and graphic novels are not usually something that I pick up, but I read Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, and I didn't understand a single thing about what the hell happened in this graphic novel. It's about 5 teenage girls that are all newspaper girlies, so like they deliver newspapers, and the day after Halloween there's this invasion and the world is kind of ending, and it was so confusing. At least it was pretty. The palette and the color scheme was impeccable, the illustrations were beautiful, but the story itself, I couldn't tell you a single thing of what was going on. There was an invasion, and there was time travel, and there was people blaming each other on different sides, saying that the other one was evil. It was just a little bit too much for an introduction to a graphic novel, because we really got into the mess of things and we didn't really know these characters. It was just like, bam, the world is ending, everyone is blaming each other, and I just don't know what's going on. So it was not a favorite. I ended up giving it 3 stars because it just felt right. I didn't dislike it, but if you asked me anything, I couldn't tell you anything about it, quite honestly. So I'm not continuing on with the series, but at least the illustrations were really pretty. Then the last book that I actually finished, because Sorcery of Thorns I just DNF'd, but the last book that I finished was The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp, and I did this insane that I think will also probably be out by the time you watch this, like 24-hour readathon, because I had put this book for sale even though I hadn't read it yet, and then I felt really bad about selling it without reading it, so I forced myself to read it in 24 hours before I shipped it, and it worked. I mean, I read it and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I didn't like it either. I'm not having the best time reading, you know. This book is about my character Nora, and she is in this kind of like awkward love triangle because her ex-boyfriend is one of her best friends, and they're like 3 people that are friends with each other, right? Her ex-boyfriend, and then this girl, and she and the girl start dating without the ex-boyfriend knowing, and then the ex-boyfriend finds out and he's really upset because they're all friends and they shouldn't have lied to each other, and there's like this kind of tense situation going in. And one morning they're at a bank, and suddenly there's a bank robbery, and they have to save themselves and try to stop this heist and bank robbery from happening. And as we dive into that, we find out that maybe Nora is not exactly who she says she is. She had a con artist for a mother who taught her and made her be all these different girls for her schemes throughout the years. So she grew up in this really like toxic and abusive environment, and she has a lot of tricks up her sleeve. Firstly, when I started this book, I thought for some dumb reason that they were going to do the bank robbery because she was a con artist, which would have been so much more fun in my opinion. But what I disliked about this book was it was too outlandish. It was too far gone in the realm of possibility. It was just a little bit too much of everything. Because Nora, though I found her to be an okay main character, the things that she said that she had done and the stories that she had to tell were just a little bit too much. And when you're reading a book of this type, a thriller, a mystery, a YA crime story, you know that you need to suspend your disbelief a little bit. You need to be like, okay, I'm in this world and maybe this is possible. But some of the things that she was doing, it was giving mafia leader. It was giving 007 at 12 years old. And it was just a little bit too much for me personally. Every time that I was reading, I was like, you did that when you were 10 years old? And I'm just like, you did what when you were 12? And it just involved the FBI and the mafia. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this is not at all possible. Not even just a little bit. It's not at all possible. It's just, it's not realistic. And the plot got less entertaining as we went on. The resolution to the bank heist was not my favorite. The stakes, because it was a YA, felt really low. And it was just not, I liked the way that it was written because it had a lot of chapters about backstory and it intertwined the actual heist with some other narratives from her life and the people around her to flesh out the characters. But unfortunately, the characters didn't really feel all that fleshed out. And quite unfortunately, a lot of the characters in this book were abused in some type of way or were in an abusive situation. And though I do empathize with that, you can't really make trauma a personality trait. And if you strip these characters of their trauma, there's not much else there. You know what I mean? So in terms of the characters, they weren't very fleshed out. They weren't very dynamic. And the relationships between them, I cared about them. Like, I enjoyed her relationship with Iris, for example, and her friendship with Wes, but I found that it really lacked the subtlety of platonic friendships that, for example, Radio Silence by Alice Oseman has, because that book, their platonic friendship is it's such a big part of the book, and it's so important, and you really feel it when you're reading the book because it's very subtle. They don't say it to each other, they think about it, but they just don't mention it constantly. And I feel like in this book it really lacked that subtlety because they were always like, I would have burned the world for you, I would kill everyone for you. Like, this is such a platonic relationship. And every time that he said I love you, she was like, this is in a platonic way, haha. Like, he doesn't really love me in a romantic way, not anymore, but we did used to date. And it was just very telling and not showing, and I didn't like that, because if you tell me that you're just friends and this man tells you that he loves you, I know that it's just in a friendship way. You don't need to say it on page every single time that he hugs you. This is a platonic hug, this is a platonic thing. Like, I get it, you know, I get it. And I just didn't really enjoy this. And then after the bank heist was done, I'm not going to say anything about it, but after that, we still got introduced to like a 50-page continuation of plot or subplot that feels like it's setting up for a sequel, but I'm not sure if there's a sequel, and it just felt like a waste of time. Like, why would you at the end give us 50 extra pages of something that we're not going to see resolved? I feel like it would have been fine as an open ending at like the last page to be like, oh, something else is coming. But giving it 50 pages of plot progression when there's not going to be plot progression because the book is ending just felt a little bit stupid, in my opinion. So 3 stars. I didn't really like it. I feel like if you're just looking for a good time, it isn't a quick and easy read. But in terms of the heist, not a favorite. In terms of the friendships, read Radio Silence. In terms of my 3.5, I have A Bomb Shelter by Mary Lauren Phillips, something like that. And this is an audiobook that I had carried over from last year that I finished early in January. And it's just a collection of short essays about this author's life and about her relationship with her family. And I really, really enjoyed this one. She has a very sweet way of looking at life. It's very tender, and it has a lot of, not difficult in like a tragedy way, but just difficult moments to listen to. But I just really appreciated the message of this essays and the way that it was written, and I highly recommend it if you like non-fiction collection of essays to listen to. Then my other 3.5 star was really good, actually, by Monica Hazy. This is a story about a woman named Maggie, and she gets divorced at 20 something, 28. Oh my god, I can't quite remember. Or as like a 30-year-old, and it's all about her divorce and her coming to terms with the fact that their relationship has ended. And it is very self-indulgent, I will say that. Our main character, most people, the reviews that I've read, hate her. And I get it, but I never hated her at any point. I really liked the audiobook. It was just a fun audiobook to listen to, but it is very self-indulgent. It is very repetitive also, and she's not always the most likable, but you know, she's going through something that's really tough. And it's one of those books where the humor you either identify with or you don't, and I thought it was funny at most of the time, so I had a good time listening to this one. But I would say that you might not, because there are a lot of people that have been listening to this or reading it and they found her very insufferable, which I understand, but thankfully that was not my experience. I had a good time listening to this one. It was a quick and easy read, and I found it to be kind of funny, I'm not going to lie. So 3.5, I had a good time. Then for my 4-star reads, I listened to Bliss Montage by Ling Ma, which is the other collection of short stories that I listened to, and it was amazing. I highly recommend this one. Ling Ma is the author of Severance, which I am going to read because I really enjoyed this one. And there are short stories about culture, about domestic violence, about relationships, about family. They're kind of bizarre. In every single story, there's an element of fantasy, I would say, or at least something otherworldly, right? Something very bizarre. And I just really connected with the stories. I remember I really loved one called Peking Duck, and there were others that I really liked, but I can't remember what they were. Oh, my favorite story was actually G. That was my favorite one. I really liked the stories. I liked the narrative voice. The audiobook is such a great experience, and I am definitely going to read more by Ling Ma. If you like short story collection, this is a really strong one. I didn't dislike any of the stories, and it was just a good and entertaining and interesting and different collection of short stories. Then the next book that I gave 4 stars to was Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. I think that everyone knows what this is about, right? This is about the suburban mom drama in Australia. It's about a single mom that moves to a new city with her son, and she befriends these women, and you're counting down to a moment where a murder happens. There is this school, not really a reunion, just an event for parents, and you know that someone is murdered at this event, and you don't know who and you don't know why, and it's just a really slow unraveling of the story. I enjoyed all of the petty drama. I liked the writing. Even though it's a bigger mystery, it really read quite nicely if you enjoy this type of mystery. And I just found the dramatic and drama-filled aspects of this book so entertaining. And I will say that the only reason I didn't give it a higher rating was because of the ending, actually, because I was expecting a little bit more. Because of how much people talk about this one, I was expecting a little bit more out of the who died and who done it. But I will say that I was satisfied. It wasn't unsatisfying. I still really enjoyed it. I was just a little bit disappointed, but still a very solid read. I need to watch the series because everyone says that it's amazing. But if you enjoy slower mysteries and you enjoy petty drama, then you definitely need to read this one. Okay, and now we are into the last 2 books that I have to tell you about, and they're all in the part of the same series, and that is The Trials of Morgan Crow and Wonder Smith, The Calling of Morgan Crow. These are 2 books in the Nevermoor series by Jessica Townsend. This is a middle grade series about a character, I was gonna call her Jessica, no, that's the author, Morgan Crow, who is a cursed child, and she is doomed to die at 11 years old, and she is said to bring bad luck to everyone around her. But actually, on the day she turns 11, she is actually taken away to this magical society by a man called Jupiter Thorne, and she is trying to enroll in this magic academy that is going to be life-changing. And talk about life-changing, even though I know it feels stupid for me to say this because I didn't give the book 5 stars, but this book's kind of changed my life. I'm kind of obsessed with them. Every time that I heard people talking about Morgan Crow, I just thought it wouldn't be for me because I'm not a middle grade person, but I picked it up in my library and my life changed. Like the vlogs where I read this, everything about it was just so wonderful. I loved Morgan. I love Morgan. I love all her friends. It's the wholesome books that I needed in my life, and I am so excited for the first book to come out this year. You don't even know. I'm in the process of buying all of the books slowly I'm getting there. I'm trying to find secondhand copies because I need to have these books in my hands in real life. I'm just obsessed. I'm just obsessed. These were the best books ever. I gave the first one 4 stars and the second one 4.5, rounded up to a 5. I just had the time of my life reading these big ass books, and they made my reading year so much better already. And they were the highlight of this 2 months of reading, let me tell you that much. Okay, I am going to shut up now. I have told you about the 12 books that I read or tried to read since the beginning of the year. It is now the first day of March, and I am praying for a better reading month because I have been struggling with the books that I've been picking up. Let me know if you've read any of these books or what you thought about them, and let me know what was your favorite book of February or January, whichever month you want to talk about. Let me know what has been your favorite book of the year so far, anything like that. Leave me a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content, and I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.